Hello and welcome to today's video on calibrating multiple extruders on a 3D printer. This video will explain all the steps needed to get your extruders pushing the proper amount of material out and make your prints look amazing. That's right, no more filament blobs, jams, or stringing. So when your G-code tells the printer to extrude 10 millimeters of filament, you're going to believe it. So let's get started. To calibrate your extruders, you will need some basic tools. Of course, you have to have a working 3D printer, a pair of calipers or a ruler, a dark marker, and some pliers to remove the filament from the hot end. The first step is to turn on your 3D printer and begin heating up your hot ends. For PLA, this temperature is between 170 degrees Celsius and 180 degrees Celsius. For step 2, you will need to mark 120 millimeters on the filament from the entrance to the extruder. Imprint X is a Bowden extruder, and we will mark from the entrance to the stepper motor. For a direct extruder, this would be where the filament is pulled into the hot end. Our printer has 3 extruders, so we need to measure 120 millimeters on each filament. For step 3, we need to tell the printer to extrude 100 millimeters for each extruder. This can be done directly on the printer or connecting your computer to your printer by using a program like Pronterface. For step 4, we need to measure to the line again. If your printer is calibrated correctly, we should have 20 millimeters. Greater than 20, we are under extrusion and need to increase the steps per millimeter. Less than 20, we are over extruding and need to decrease the steps per millimeter. For step 5, we are calculating our new step value. There are 3 formulas we will need to use. The actual length we extrude is calculated by subtracting our measured length from 120. Then, we need to look up what our step value is, and this can be done in Marlin or using G-code by sending M503 to our printer. Once we have the step value, you will calculate the actual steps taken by multiplying this value by 100, and this is the actual step value. Finally, we'll calculate the step value by dividing the actual step value by the actual length. In our example, we had a measured length of 59.4 millimeters for extruder 1, 73.84 millimeters for extruder 2, and 39.93 for extruder 3. To find what our current steps per millimeter values are, we can either look them up in Marlin or send a G-code command to our printer. In this example, I will look in Marlin. These steps are stored in a variable called default axis steps per unit. Please note the first 3 variables are relating to X, Y, and Z motion in the machine, and do not apply to our extruders. Starting with the 4th number is where the steps are stored for the extruders. I have 3 numbers because I have 3 extruders, where Marlin actually stores extruder 1 as E0, extruder 2 as E1, and extruder 3 as E2. So for this example, my current steps per millimeter for extruder 1 is found to be 96.53. For extruder 2, the steps are 100.10, and for extruder 3, we have the steps as 98.81. So for our calculations, we will need these values. Alright, it's time to do the dreaded calculations. I've done my best to kind of go line by line and show you each formula being used. For example, the green is the extruder 1. We had the actual length 120 minus 59.4, and we get 60.6 millimeters. We will then take our steps for extruder 1, multiply that by 100, and we get 9,653 steps. And then our new step value calculation will be 9,653 divided by the actual length, 60.6, and our new step value will be 159.29. So I've done this for the other 2 extruders. And as you can see in our example, our lengths are less than the 100 millimeters we sent to the machine. So we are actually pushing less filament through each extruder than what we wanted. Please feel free to pause the video if you need more time. I'm going to go back to Marlin now and edit the default steps per unit with our new calculated values for each extruder. I like to reflash the boards with Marlin, but again, you can use G-code to also make this change. You can use G-code M92 to edit the steps and M500 to save changes. For our extruder 1 and Marlin, they're calling this E0. We're going to change our step value to 159.29. For extruder 2, Marlin calls this E1, and we're going to change our steps to 216.85. And finally, for extruder 3, called E2, and Marlin, we're going to change our steps to 123.40. I will then take our Marlin and reflash our board with these new step values. I reflashed the board with our new values we calculated for the steps, and I had to repeat the process a few more times. I wanted to get exactly 20 millimeters, and this caused me to have to run the whole process a few times until I finally honed down the length I wanted for the measured length. Well, if you made it this far through the video, I hope you found this information useful, and please like and subscribe to our channel to let me know if you would like more educational videos on 3D printing.